Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology, and on this channel we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe and bell button. I need to see you back next week, and of course, stay tuned because we're going to start a new series as promised, so keep watching and happy March. All right, so let's jump into it. This month, we're going to focus on the overlap, differences, and core definitions, ideas surrounding mental health and spiritual health. But first, let's start off with mental health. And as you already know, this is something I talk about. I talk about psychology, mental health, wellness, things of that nature. There's plenty of content here on this channel related to that topic. However, I'd like to first start off with what a lot of people feel like mental health is, and some of this may actually resonate with you. And then I want us to transition into a concise conversation around some ideas that you can start to spread your perspective, your understanding of what mental health is. Sorry, tongue twister. And if I sound a little bit of nosy, my goodness, nosy and a bit foggy, it's because it's a cold. It's trying to get me, and I won't let it. But please forgive me. That's why I sound a little bit different. Anywho, let's get started. So mental health. A lot of people feel that mental health is strictly related to how you feel, your emotions, and that if you have a negative emotion, then your mental health is not good, that you have poor mental health. Others have this belief that mental health is if you are not in a negative space and you are content and or have positive emotions, then you are healthy. You have a healthy mental. And then some folks have this understanding that mental health is actually more psychological. It is more related to how you think, and which is actually cognitive, the thought processes. That's what cognitive means. And so some folks feel like, well, mental health is really related to how I think. So if I can tell myself to think more positively, then that is how I will feel. If I tell myself to think XYZ, then my feelings and behaviors will kind of go from there. And then you have some folks who instead look at mental health from a more behavioral perspective, simply based off of the things that we do, our actions. And all of these are really compartments of mental health overall. And so I want to really look at this word health, where a lot of us feel that it must be good and or positive in order for it to be this thing that's considered well. And that's not always true. And so let's just go with a very quick example. Say that you are nervous about having to do a presentation in front of 100 people. This is something that you've done before, but you are not quite comfortable with it. You are feeling a little bit like, oh goodness, I get the jittery, I get the butterflies every single time that this comes up. So if we were to go off of some of these ideas that we've already talked about in terms of how people look at mental health, then you would say that this person has poor mental health because they're nervous. Well, that's not necessarily fair. It just means that they were nervous in that situation, which kind of debunks this idea that if you have negative emotions in a moment or in a time, then your mental health is poor. So that's false. And say that you are going into a situation with one perspective versus another, and it doesn't yield the behaviors that you are expecting, the emotional response, even though you're cognitively thinking about it in that way. Well, it debunks that idea as well, that your cognitions will always lead how you feel and will always lead what you do. And then lastly, this idea that what we do will mold and shape the rest. And so this is to more so make an emphasis that actually how we feel, what we think, what we do, and things that are ingrained into our history all are wrapped up into our mental health and our wellness. And so when we look at mental health, just because you're experiencing something negatively doesn't mean that you're not mentally well. And just because you feel like you are content and you feel like you have more positive emotional responses than negative doesn't mean that there are areas surrounding your mental health that does not need attention. And that is where we start to reach into those things that's in the past, the things that are buried buried, the things that we don't that are not in the forefront of our mind, and that actually do influence what we do and how we see the world. And it actually is, it requires like these situations or these experiences for it to be triggered to a point where it becomes overt, to a point where it's very noticeable, and to a point where it shows you need to show some level of attention. And so I want people to get to this point where they have an understanding, where we all have an understanding, us here, that we have an understanding that when it comes to our mental health, this is something that we work on forever. It is something that we will continue to put attention to, not just to one area, but to all areas. Granted, you may not have time set aside every single day to actually focus on this is the time where I'm going to focus on my behaviors. This is the time we're going to focus on how I'm responding emotionally, or even how I think, and so on and so forth, or even reflect on the past. But maybe you pick which one is standing out the most, and you do it on an ongoing basis. And just like when we drive a vehicle, if you've been driving a vehicle for an extended period of time, you don't have to think about the steps as much as you did when you were younger, when you first started to learn. When you first got in, okay, you'll think to yourself, I need to check the mirrors, I need to check and make sure that my blind spots, like where are my blind spots, let me get familiarized with the buttons and the gears in this vehicle. Okay, my seat is in the right spot. Like, you think about all of these things in the methods, in a methodological. I cannot talk today because I'm foggy. You think about it in steps. Like, just keep it simple. Simple. You think about it in steps, and when you have to think about it in steps, that means you're still trying to get it into a place where it's ingrained into your nature. Driving now probably feels second nature to you. The same to be said for people who cook or who are chefs. You don't have to think about many of these steps. You just automatically do it because you've done it so often. Well, mental health, or having mental wellness, is a process that you have to continue to work at. And if you do it consistently, checking on these different areas around self won't require as much thought and effort as much as it requires a routine of maintenance to keep yourself in a place where you are well. And also forgive yourself if you get to a place where you are not well, where you are not mentally healthy. It happens. And just like physically, when we get out of shape, physically, when we've eaten too many things that we are not supposed to, we start to do things to get ourselves back into shape, or back into a place where we're healthy. Or we go get labs done at the doctor, the physician's office, and they tell us, this is what your labs say. You have a deficiency of vitamin such and such, and you need to eat a little bit more iron. Those are clear signs of these are things that you need to do. Well, the same is to be said for your mental health. Paying attention to those different areas that you need to focus in on and give yourself a bit more of attention. For example, if you're starting to notice that you're a bit more agitated, you're having less patience for others, and on top of that, you're noticing that you're thinking more negatively towards certain people, well, those are just clear indicators that I need to zone into those areas and work on creating an environment and giving myself the space and time so that I am well in those areas and I am healthy. Health is something that we continue to work on, and it is a clear distinction of what wealth is. And I know that on this earth, we like to put a focus on money and valuable things and materialistic things. But instead, if you are not healthy, you can have all the money in the world and you're not mentally well, you're not going to be able to enjoy it anyways. So there is value. This is a hot commodity that you need to work on, so to speak. And so I want to pause it here and give you all some time to start thinking about, how do you define mental health? How are you looking at it? Are you looking at it in one of the three ways that I described at the beginning of this video? Or maybe you look at it differently, but nonetheless, I want you to also start thinking about, based off of the information that I presented here, how are you going to stretch your idea of how you are receiving or perceiving your mental health? And what are you going to do to be sure that you maintain it and that you are in a place of wellness consistently? Again, health is wealth. It is something that is valuable. It's something that you will always continue to work on maintaining. So answer those questions for yourself. I'd also love to see what your plan is. If you want to drop it down in the comments. And of course, you saw the information there on the screen. Feel free to go give me a follow on Instagram, Facebook, as well as Clubhouse at Dr. Blaire across all platforms. And of course, I'd love to see you back here, as I said at the beginning of the video. So subscribe here and come back and join us for more conversations, because next week we're going to dive into a conversation conversation surrounding spiritual health. And it's actually not usual that I kind of give you all this heads up of what I'm going to talk about next, but we'll be talking about spiritual health next. And then after that, we'll be talking about the overlap and the differences of that for the rest of the month. But with that being said, I'm going to put a pause here because even though it was a short conversation, it is a lot to have to think about and a lot to have to define and decide for yourself and what this looks like for you as an individual. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share with your community, and be sure to share with someone specific who needs to hear a little bit more about mental health and its components. And of course, remember, before you go, and I see you next time, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.